Hello my friends, what I'm going to do today is review a program called Go Physical from Ken 1171. He says it's an automator, not a converter, but what it does is it automates, inverted commas, the process of converting poser surface materials into physical surface materials. Now, in case you're not familiar with them, if I go to the material room, you'll see here that we have a material for Michael 4. This is a Firefly material connected to a poser surface root node. And there's another type of root node. Well, there are two actually, but we won't talk about cycles today. There's physical surface. And when you're rendering Superfly, by default, Poser attempts to convert poser surface over to a Superfly render if you're rendering in Superfly. Obviously, if you're rendering in Firefly, it just uses this and that's fine. But a lot of this stuff is not needed. This physically based rendering root node produces, a physically based renderer produces much more realistic surfaces and materials. I know some of you guys think it doesn't, but it does. It's just a matter of how you set it up. And far more importantly, it's much, much quicker to render physical surface than it is to render poser surface. Look at all this stuff going on, whereas typically a physical surface will have maybe 3 or 4 images plugged in and that's it. So what Go Physical does is it sets up this physical surface node with the right images connected and it automates that process. Now, Ken has gone with an overabundance of caution by not calling it a converter because it does endeavour, just as Firefly does actually, when Poser renders this poser surface node in Superfly, it still endeavours to convert these into physically based materials. And likewise, when you use Ken's Go Physical script, it endeavours to convert some of these values and stuff over. You will definitely need to tweak them, and some of them are just not convertible without more work. But let's move on first of all. So the program, you can buy it for $16.95, I believe. Let's have a look. $16.95 at either of the two Bondware / Renderosity stores. And when you receive it, it's on a zip file. The easiest way to install it is simply go to File, Install from Zip Archive, and then you choose the zip file, choose the runtime that you want to install it on, or leave it on the default, and it will install. Once it's installed, you then go up to Scripts, and you go down to Poser 6, Ken 1171, and choose Go Physical. By default, it will dock to any of these windows, but this option here prevents it from docking, and I've already switched that off so that it won't keep docking when I'm trying to work. So you see here we have two versions of Michael. They both have the Firefly texture by default. I'm going to choose the one on the right, so that's actually Michael 5. And now I can choose to simply apply physical surface to selected parts, which you may need, especially if you have metal or eyeballs or stuff, or you can apply it to everything. There's another nice option here that it also, if you click this option, will apply it to all conformed clothing. So I'm going to switch that for now. So let me just take you into the material room first of all, and I'll select Michael's face. And you'll see here, by default, we have this poser surface node. So this is still set properly. Michael 5, the selected figure, and I click this Make Physical Surface, and bang, it's just converted all of those clothes and all of the other stuff. So I choose Michael 5, and you see now it adds this new root node down here, Physical Surface, and you can see On this particular part, it only has 3 connectors, and that's almost certainly the skin texture, the bump map, and roughness. Now, Poser doesn't come with roughness by default. So what it's done, it's automatically converted the roughness map, the specular map, which would be used to create highlights, into a roughness map, which kind of decides how smooth or bumpy the surface is. If there's no specular map, it will use the bump map instead. It's not perfect, but it's a great way to start. And it also inverts the map and does the other stuff it has to do. So now if we go over to our screen, our preview window, render settings, Superfly, and I've just got it on the lowest setting, and I'll just do a render. So the figure on this side has been converted over. Okay, there are lots of figures off the screen that you can't see, which is why it's taking a while to load. But what you'll see is that there's really not an awful lot of difference between them. The way it handles eyes and eye surfaces varies greatly from figure to figure. But you'll see that with a single click, I've now got a figure which uses the physical surface node. And just to give you an idea, this figure, if I render this figure just on its own using the Firefly texture, but convert it, using Poser's built-in converter, which it just runs automatically, that figure takes 81.45 seconds to render in Superfly, but converted to the physical surface root node, it only takes 44.87 seconds. So that's almost half the time. So if you have a less powerful computer, this is a great way to speed up your rendering time. So I really love physical surface, physically based rendering, because it's just so much more realistic, and contrary to what a lot of you guys think, it actually is faster. It's just that you're generally not comparing like with like. When you do a Firefly render, you rarely turn on indirect lighting and subsurface, which is where the time goes up. So let me just have a quick look at this figure, and I'll just go into his face, and that's connected there. Now I'm looking for his hair. Okay, so it didn't convert the hair there. Let me just check his clothes then. Okay, well, while I'm here, I'll just quickly convert the hair as well. Oh, darn it. I've done the hair on this figure, but it doesn't matter. You can just figure it out in your head. Oh, actually, no. Let me show you this, right? So I converted the hair. Oh, no, it's hair 1. That was right, wasn't it? No. Okay, so let me just check. That's Blaine hair. That's right. So I've done the wrong hair, but it's very, very easy to fix. There's 2 ways I could do that. One is that I could just set this to render the original Poser surface node, or I could simply delete this. And I'll do that now. I'll just quickly go through. So the great thing about this is that when you run it, you then have both a Firefly and a Superfly material. So if you're rendering in Superfly, it will use the Superfly physical surface, and if you're rendering in Firefly, it will use the Firefly root node here, and it adds the correct thing there. So it's really very, very easy to use. So let me choose the right Blaine hair, and now I'm going to run that. And it really is super quick, and now it's converted that over. Let me just check his clothes to make sure that did convert those. Yeah, it did his clothes, but it didn't do his hair. So I thought it did hair as well, but that's okay. It did actually say in the thing, apply to conformed. So I guess hair is not really conformed, so I can't blame him for that. In fact, Ken has been exceedingly honest about the limitations of this program. So just have a look at that. So I'm doing an area render here with this option. It's just a quicker way than rendering the whole scene. Well, that still loads all the materials, which it has to for the ray tracing, but you'll see that that is really pretty good. Now, where you'll often see problems with this conversion is in the eyes when they've got special reflections and stuff like that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a second figure. So this is Victoria 4, and it's got a Mecha subsurface material on. So this program won't do subsurface. So I'll just run this, and I'll just do apply to all conformed again. So I'm doing the one on this side again, the right as you're looking at it, I guess. Again, very, very quick. And now I want to show you why there's a problem with subsurface. So this is converted subsurface. It has a subsurface node here, but here is the subsurface part of this physical surface node. And to be honest, if you compare that to this, for him to convert that over, he would have had to make a lot of guesses. Now, to be honest, he's making guesses already. He could have converted that color perhaps into RGB values here for the scatters and then set the scatters to 0.1 or something. But he's made lots of educated guesses in this, but subsurface is one area that he didn't guess. And there are other parts of the figure where they I've seen materials that do subsurface, but they don't do subsurface using the subsurface node. They reconstruct it mathematically. So I'm just converting across and checking her clothes. So that's a small limitation. Just, again, so long as you understand the limitations of the program, there's no robbery. And for 1695, really, there isn't a lot to complain about anyway. So let me just quickly render this so that you can see in Superfly. Okay, so here's another thing. The eyes surface, you saw with Michael before it was fine. Now this has gone a bit reflective. So what this does is a bit shiny, sorry. What this does is it takes a guess at what the value should be. So what was that? Probably the skirt has gone too shiny. So why has it gone shiny? Here's the skirt material. Is it this one? Yep, here's the skirt material. So what's made that shiny? Actually, I have no idea. That shouldn't be shiny like that. Okay, right. So, okay, here's a problem. I love materials that are clothes that are like this, but it ran into a slight problem with this, and it shows why he says that this is simply a starting point. There's no textures plugged into this, so there's no texture for him to work out a roughness map. Remember I said with Michael that the roughness map was calculated from either the bump map or the specular map, and I'll just go back to Michael and prove that to you. So if I go to Michael 5 and I choose his face, and we've got this roughness map here. So if I follow this red, you'll see here he's got a specular to roughness converter, but it's converting this specular map. The specular map is the shine map, and you'll see there. So when we come to the skirt, this was, as I say, I love materials that are, or clothes that are just solid blocks of colour, although there's no texture to it, so that's kind of poor. But because there was no specular or bump map to convert into a roughness map, the whole thing is just too shiny. So what I do here is I just turn the roughness up to, I don't know, we'll do it to 1 just to make the point. And you recall that was super shiny before, and now if I render that, that should be now very matte. And I mean, that's quite nice. That's a PVC look, but that might not be the look I was looking for. And now you see that's completely matte. And I could wire in some kind of procedural bump map, such as, let me show you here. So here's a skirt. I could wire in here something like a weave texture here. So we'll do colour, one is black. So I'm kind of going a bit off the deep end here just to show you how you might get around that. And then I'll wire that into the bump map. Again, I'd have to tweak that. But so this would be a way to add some texture to that because it kind of doesn't look very cottony. And I'll probably have to change the scale of that as well. But it also proves something else if it works, which hopefully it will. Okay, that scale is too low. What I need to do is increase the scale of that. So I'll do I don't know, 20 there. I don't use this very often. But what this should hopefully be doing, here we go. Can you see this kind of weave now that I'm using as a bump? It's bumping too much, but it doesn't matter. I'll do 0.2 instead, just so it's not so much. And with any luck, if I've got that scale right. Okay, this is way into the weeds on a review of the program, to be honest. But I'm just trying to, there you go. So I've added some texture to that dress, and you've also learned another skill there. But there are just some things that are a bit beyond the scope of this automator. But what was it I was going to say to you here? Yeah, it's just obviously the limitations of converting a surface that didn't have maps attached to it. But something that's really good, and I'm using my fingers to do that again off screen where you can't see, it also shows that the physical surface can accept procedural textures. And I'm just going to show you that in action even better here. So what we have here is two footstools. This is a wood material texture, I presume, down here, and I've added a procedural texture to the top. So if I select this, you'll see that there are two components plus the preview, which we're looking at now. We've got the wood at the bottom, we have the fabric. So I'm just going to selectively, I'm just going to do none, and I'm only going to convert the fabric, and then I do this, create roughness maps, blah, 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 yes. And hopefully you can see that's changed colour. And we're going to see two issues here, but we're going to see one great thing. So this is a procedural texture. So what's a procedural texture? Well, it's a mathematical texture. You really shouldn't use them if you ever want to convert your models outside Poser, because procedural textures don't export. And I'll show you why, but it looks as if this includes some kind of ambience as well. You can see the way it's made that go kind of orange. But if I go into the material, look how kind of poor this looks. So that means there's some kind of displacement going on here. And that's another thing that's beyond the scope of this program to fix. In Superfly, it doesn't handle displacement very well. I'd need to manually go in and fix that out. So what I'll do is I'll go into here, and you'll see this is the procedural texture. It's a tile, and then it's done these other things as well. And it's quite happy to just plug all of that stuff into here. And what I would probably do is take this displacement down to, well, possibly even down to 0, to be honest. And now when I render that, you won't have that weird bumpiness on the top. One solution is to take the displacement. Now, again, this is beyond the scope of the review of the program, but if you use a displacement map as a bump map, then sometimes it works. And I'll just show you what that should have been like. So if I go to Firefly, and this is just proving what I said earlier on, if I change from Superfly renderer to Firefly renderer, and I render that scene, you'll see that they both look identical and they both have some displacement. And that's because, as I said, it leaves the original root node, the Firefly or Poser surface root node, still intact, which is just so useful. You may find that especially useful if you're a content creator, because if you're creating, you've probably got a library of content that you've created. That's a subsurface pass. You've probably got a library of textures, or you're making textures, and you're very well aware that most people still use Firefly. But yet you also want to be considerate of those of us who use Superfly. So what you can do is you can build your texture as Firefly and run this program and then just make very few tweaks. And now you've got fantastic Superfly texture and fantastic Firefly texture. So here, exactly the same texture, but now it works as it should do with a microfacet displacement in Firefly. And if you compare that to this one with a displacement on Superfly, you could fix this. So what you'd have to do is you'd have to go into here and you'd have to increase the subdivision levels. But again, that's beyond the scope of this. So now I'm just going to show you one more situation. So what we have here is a mini. And this is another one of the limitations of the program. But again, he's completely honest about why it does this. So I'm going to select this mini in the middle and I'm going to run it with everything running here. And I'm just going to do this. And you'll see now when I go to super quick, isn't it? There's a lot of parts of this mini. Now I'm going to go to my Superfly renderer. And you'll see something really bad happens here. And again, this is not the program's fault. It could potentially be smarter, but it's not a converter. It's an automator. So look at this glass here and look at the glass on the headlamp, the headlamp glass. So what this creator has done in the old days, reflective surfaces couldn't automatically reflect the world around them. So what they did was they used these sphere maps to plug into the reflection. So this is reflecting this kind of sky background, which he's just provided as a bitmap. But that sucks because that's not how reflection maps work, is it? In the real world, if you're holding a mirror or a piece of glass, it's reflecting what's around you. But this was a way of simulating it. And when it does the conversion here, what it does is it doesn't plug that in to the reflection because there isn't a way of doing it. There's not a reflection map because it's a physically based material, and physically based materials just reflect what's around them by default according to their roughness value. So this is set to very, very, very matte, and it's also set to transparent. And glass is not 100% transparent. You'd work that out with incidence index of reflection, whatever that is, refraction. And this transparency value you'd probably take down a little bit. So by default, it doesn't do glass very well. But if we go to the last mini, you'll see the great thing is that here's the program again. What you can do is selectively choose not to include that. So I know that the windscreen and the glass here are both just this glass thing here. So I just simply ignore that from the conversion. And then I do make physical surface. And now when I render, they remain as Firefly, albeit rendered by Superfly, which is quite smart at figuring things out, but it has the benefit of the faster speed. And you can rightly say that you provided a Superfly material. Now, what I would do at this point is I'd manually go in and create those materials. Now, there's something else I want you to have a look at. This radiator grille here on the car is chrome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this vehicle here and I'm going to point to the very last feature. So I'm going to do none, and then I'm going to choose chrome, which I know is that grille at the front. And I'm going to use this option called Make Metal. And it could apply to something that has a texture map. If you're applying it to something that you've already done a conversion, so it already has that that physical surface root node, then you selectively go in and make certain parts metal. This just takes care of some of the details. But in this case, there is no physical surface node. So I'm just going to choose this. I'm going to do Make Metal. I don't know why it does this. This is a really crappy way of doing it. It looks like a slider, but it's a button. So I can choose what color I want the metal, but for now I'm just going to leave it on the default, which I believe is white. The roughness, again, more or less rough, and the metallicity. which is kind of how metallic it looks, I suppose. And now if I just click that, because we can selectively convert, hopefully now, when I render that, this has got the benefit of the conversion, but just this grill is now metal, and we already excluded the headlights, and you can see already that that's metallic there. So the option to choose selectively has really come forward for me, and I could choose whatever type of level of shininess and metallicity I wanted there. So, as I say, there are some materials that don't work straight out of the box, and it's very likely that you would need to go into your materials and do some tweaking anyway. It provides a starting point, not the be all and end all. One of the areas where you might need to make adjustments is the bump map, and another is the amount of roughness. But as an overall quick way of converting your materials ready for you to start tweaking them, and I think most people also can recognize a physical surface node is much easier to read than a poser surface node when you want to work from it. So even if you're a beginner, this is a great way to start learning how to make PBR materials, physically based render materials. So I think I have to give this program at least a 9 out of 10 for usefulness. To be honest, the subsurface it might have had a guess at, so that's where it loses a point. But what it does, I think it does pretty well. I would also actually have liked the metallicity thing here to have given you more of a preview of what the metal looks like, because I don't know what that amount of roughness looks like, and I don't know what that amount of metallicity looks like, and I don't like this button. So if there'd been a little preview thing here, it could have at least given me an idea as I move these sliders. If nothing else, for me to know, is that more metal or is that less metal? I assume it's less that side and more roughness, which means more matte. But, you know, that means I've got to remember that matte is that way and shiny is this way. Whereas if there'd just been a little preview thing here, a little preview window, that would have just made that a little easier. But as I say, a good solid 9 out of 10. 8 out of 10 if I'm being churlish. 9.5 if I'm being generous. $16.95. I really can't complain, and for any content creator, I think this is an excellent starting place for converting hair, skin textures, props, vehicles, pretty much anything. Obviously it doesn't do lights, but it does pretty much anything else you need to do. So yeah, excellent job there, Ken. And guys, I hope you enjoyed the review.